Arthur Blackwood, at 63, was a man carved from the same Manhattan granite as the skyscrapers his firm had designed. His life was a monument to control. From his corner office, 48 floors above Park Avenue, he had spent 4 decades building a legacy, Blackwood and Associates, a name synonymous with the kind of brutalist, elegant architecture that humbled politicians and awed billionaires. He was a man of substance, of weight. His suits were bespoke. His handshake was a contract, and his Patek Philippe watch didn't just tell time, it measured it approvingly. He was, in every respect, the king. And now, the king was abdicating. His retirement party was in 2 weeks. The firm was being left in the capable, if somewhat slick, hands of his protege, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was 38, all sharp angles and restless ambition. He was the son Arthur and his wife, Eleanor, had never had. Eleanor was the other pillar of his life. Where Arthur built with steel and stone, Eleanor built with influence and grace. She ran the Blackwood Foundation, a powerful arts trust that was the soul to his firm's muscle. They were a perfect partnership, a fortress of wealth, taste, and quiet, unassailable power. This, Arthur thought, was what it felt like to have won. The suspicion began on a quiet Tuesday. It was not a thunderclap. It was a hairline fracture, the kind he knew could, over time, bring down a building. He was in his home study, a room of dark mahogany and the scent of old leather, searching for the original property deed for their estate in the Hamptons, a legacy document for the lawyers. He rarely entered Eleanor's adjacent study, a space of white lacquer and modern art. It was her domain, but he was impatient. He knew the deed was in their main safe, and the key, she'd once told him, was in her desk. He sat in her cream-colored chair, feeling like an intruder. He knew the lock combination, 08.15, their anniversary. A small drawer clicked open. Inside, no key, just her checkbook and a few foundation pamphlets. He ran his hand along the bottom of the drawer. His fingers found a small magnetic catch, a false bottom. Arthur's heart gave a single, hard thump. A false bottom, in his house. The panel lifted. Inside, nestled in dark green velvet, were 3 items. The first was a stack of cash, $50 bills, bound in a simple rubber band, $10,000. The second was a small, black, anonymous-looking burner phone. The third, and most terrifying, was a thin, black leather ledger, the kind his father used to keep. He opened it. The pages were filled with neat, precise columns of dates and numbers. It was a payment log, a single payment of $5,000 made on the 1st of every month. It started 35 years ago, the exact month he'd won the bid for the Harrington Trust Building, the project that had made him. The payments were relentless, unbroken, totaling over $2 million. But that was not the part that made the blood drain from his face. It was the handwriting. The ledger was kept in his hand, the familiar, strong, architectural script he'd used his entire life, and he had absolutely no memory of it. A cold, electric dread filled the room. This wasn't a secret. This was an erasure. He stared at his own signature, at a 35-year-long financial commitment he did not know he had. Was this Alzheimer's? Was his mind, the one thing he trusted, finally betraying him? He picked up the burner phone. His hand was shaking. He powered it on. The screen glowed. 1 contact. Handler. He pressed call. It rang twice. A man answered. The voice was cold, with a faint, unplaceable European accent. Yes? Who is this? Arthur's voice was a dry rasp, a cold, humorless laugh. You're late, Arthur. We expected the call. Janus is impatient. Janus? What are you talking about? The arrangement is the arrangement. The final payment is due. Your retirement does not void the contract. It accelerates it. The full balance, $500,000. You have 1 week. I don't know who you are, Arthur said, his voice rising in panic. You knew 35 years ago, the man said, his voice hardening. You knew when you built your entire life on a lie. You know what's at stake. Your legacy, your wife, 1 week Arthur, or we burn the monument. The line went dead. Arthur sat in the white chair, the phone in his hand. He was frozen. This wasn't memory loss. This was blackmail. A blackmail so old, so deep, that he had repressed the original crime. He was being blackmailed for a sin he could no longer remember, and the payments were being managed, it seemed, by his wife. He looked at the name on the ledger. The Janus account. Janus, the two-faced god, the god of beginnings and endings. His perfect life, his entire legacy, was a two-faced lie, and the other face was starting to show. His first instinct was to confront Eleanor, to throw the ledger on the table and demand the truth. But he stopped. If she was a victim, she was in terrible danger. But what if she wasn't a victim? What if she was the handler? The thought was venomous. His elegant, graceful wife, managing a 35-year extortion, the cash, the burner phone, the false bottom drawer. It was the careful, meticulous work of a spy. He suddenly reevaluated their life, her charity trips, her long private lunches, her insistence on managing their liquid assets through the foundation. And then, the coldest thought of all, Marcus Thorne. Eleanor and Marcus. They were close, very close. Arthur had always seen it as a mother-son relationship, but what if it wasn't? Marcus, the ambitious protege. Eleanor, the powerful wife. Arthur, the old king, about to retire. It was a perfect, bloodless coup. They were pushing him out, but first they had to liquidate his final asset. They had manufactured this blackmail, this Janus threat, to panic him into paying $500,000. It was a golden parachute, not for him, but for them. They were going to bleed him dry, make him think he was paying off a ghost, and then, what? Run? Take over the firm and his fortune? He felt a rage so cold and pure it steadied his hand. He was not a fool. He was not a weak old man. He was Arthur Blackwood. He had built this world and he would not be so easily removed from it. He would not be the victim. He would be the spy. He placed the ledger and the phone back in the compartment. He closed the drawer. He sat at his own desk, his mind, sharpened by the betrayal, starting to work. If he was being blackmailed, he needed to know the crime. What did he do 35 years ago? He put his retirement on hold. He told a concerned Marcus, just a few final details to review. He began his espionage at the office. He didn't go to the digital archives. He went to the basement, to the dead storage, where the paper records were kept. He pulled the files for the Harrington Trust Building, 1988. He spent 2 days poring over blueprints, ledgers, and inspector reports. He was looking for the flaw, the compromise, the cheap concrete, the falsified stress test, the bribe. He found nothing. The building was perfect. The materials were over-spec. The inspections were clean. He had built it by the book. He sat back, frustrated. If the crime wasn't in the business, it had to be personal. His second line of attack, Eleanor. He did the one thing he had never done. He put a tail on his own wife. He hired a discreet, expensive PI, a man named Heller, who specialized in corporate, not domestic issues. I suspect my wife is being leveraged by a business competitor, Arthur lied, the words tasting like acid. I want to know who she meets. Everything. Heller's report came 2 days later, a set of photographs. Eleanor, at a high-end restaurant in Soho. She was in a private booth. She was not alone. She was with Marcus. Arthur stared at the photos. They weren't mother and son. They were conspirators. Her hand was on his. His face was intense, urgent. They were leaning in close, their heads almost touching. The report said they met for 2 hours. They paid in cash. Arthur felt a physical sickness. The affair was the oldest, most pathetic story in the book. But this was worse. This was an alliance. This was a hostile takeover of his life. The psychological warfare began. Arthur, are you all right? Eleanor asked at dinner, her face a perfect mask of concern. You seem distracted. You've been at that office day and night. I thought you were retiring. Just tying up loose ends, he said, watching her. Every kind word felt like a lie. You look pale, Marcus said at a board meeting after Arthur had lost his train of thought. Perhaps you should take that vacation early. Let me handle the transition. They were gaslighting him, making him and everyone else think he was losing his mind. The perfect pretext for his retirement, which was really an expulsion. The burner phone rang again. He answered, his voice hard. I'm not paying. The European voice laughed. Stubborn. Like him. We thought you might be, so we're escalating. We're sending you a reminder, a little piece of the past you tried to bury. What are you talking about? Check your mail. The next morning, a FedEx envelope arrived at his office. It had no return address. Inside was a single 8x10 black and white photograph. It was a picture of two young men in their late 20s standing on a construction site. They were in work boots, grinning, their arms slung around each other. One of them was him. He had no idea who the other one was. He stared at the face. The man was handsome, with a wild energy in his eyes. He looked familiar, terribly, achingly familiar. He tore his office apart. He went to his oldest albums, the ones from before his marriage. He found the photo, tucked in the back of an album from 1987. The two men. Underneath, a caption in his mother's hand. Arthur and Thomas, the A&T construction days, before the fall. Thomas. It was like a grenade had gone off in his skull. Thomas, his brother, his twin brother. The memories, sealed for 35 years, came flooding back with the force of a tidal wave. Thomas, the real architect, the unstable, brilliant, reckless artist. Arthur wasn't the designer. He was the businessman, the fixer, A&T Construction, their first failed company, the Harrington Trust bid. It wasn't his. It was Thomas's design. The fall. Arthur fell into his chair, breathing hard. He remembered the fire. It wasn't a clean project. To win the bid, they had to cut corners. A lot of corners, bribed inspectors, substandard steel. Thomas, the idealist, found out. He was furious. He threatened to go to the press, to blow the whistle. There was a fight, a terrible, violent fight at the construction site late at night. And then, the fire. It had started in the wiring room where they'd hidden the falsified reports. Thomas had run in to get them, to get the proof. Arthur had run in to stop him. A beam had fallen. Thomas was trapped. Arthur could see his brother, his hand reaching out from the flames. And he had frozen. He had looked at the flames, at his brother, and at the blueprints, which had been blown to safety on the floor. He had saved the blueprints. He had grabbed the plans, his future, his legacy, and he had left his brother to die. He sat in his office, 63 years old, and wept for the first time in his adult life. He wasn't a king. He was a murderer, a modern-day Cain. The Janus account wasn't blackmail. It was penance. But Thomas was dead. He'd seen him die. So who was he paying? He looked at the photo again, his mind clear for the first time. He hadn't just repressed the memory. He had surgically removed it. He'd erased Thomas. He'd told Eleanor. He'd told everyone. He was an only child. He had built his monument on his brother's grave. But the payments, the ledger, his handwriting, it was his. He had been paying. But who? He grabbed his coat. He knew he wasn't paying for blackmail. He was paying for a secret. He didn't hire a PI. He went himself. He drove to the Bank of New York, the one that managed his private wealth. He was Arthur Blackwood. He didn't need permission. He sat with the bank president. I need to trace the payments from the Janus account. I founded it in 1988. The president, a man named Davies, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Blackwood, that's a trust. You can't access it. It's my money. No, sir, it's not. You are the contributor, but not the beneficiary. As per your own instructions, the account is sealed. It's managed by the foundation. My foundation? Yes, sir, by the director, Mrs. Blackwood. The blood drained from his face. Eleanor. It was all Eleanor. She knew. She had always known. She wasn't his conspirator. She was his jailer. She was the guardian of his secret. The European handler. It was all her. He drove home, the rage from before now replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. He walked into the house. Eleanor was in the living room, arranging flowers. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. She looked up, her face calm. "Yes, I suppose we do." 35 years, Eleanor. You've been paying it, the Janus account. She stopped, a white rose in her hand. "Yes. You lied to me. You pretended this whole life." "What did you want me to do, Arthur?" she asked, her voice quiet, but with a steel he had never heard. "Remind you? You came to me a month after the fire. You were a ghost. You told me, 'I've done a terrible thing. I can never speak of it, but I have to make it right.' You set up the trust. You made me the executor. You told me to handle it. And then you chose to forget. You built a new life. You became Arthur Blackwood, the architect. You erased Thomas. You erased your crime. My job was to carry it for you." "But Thomas is dead," Arthur yelled. Eleanor's face softened, her eyes filling with a profound, weary sadness. "No, Arthur. He's not." The words hit him like a physical blow. What? "You didn't save the blueprints. You called 911. You ran. The fire department pulled him out. He was alive. Barely." "Alive? Where is he? Why did you tell me?" "You told me he was dead. You convinced yourself of it. It was the only way you could live. He was horribly burned, Arthur. His mind, the fire, the betrayal, it broke him. He was institutionalized." "Where?" he whispered. "A private clinic in Switzerland. The best in the world. That's where the money goes. For 35 years. For his care. To keep him safe. To keep you safe." Arthur slumped against the wall. His brother was alive. All this time, a part of his own soul was sitting in a room in Switzerland, and he had never known. "The burner phone," he stammered. "The handler. The blackmail. The voice." "That," Eleanor said, "was new. That started a month ago." "What do you mean?" "The blackmail is real, Arthur," she said, her voice shaking for the first time. "But it's not from me." "Then who?" "I don't know," she said. "A month ago, I was contacted. Someone found the payment ledger. They knew the secret. They knew about Thomas. They demanded $500,000, or they would go to the New York Times with the whole story. The fire, the bribe, the murdered brother. They were going to destroy you right before your retirement." Arthur stared at her. "The photos of you in Soho." "I was meeting a private investigator," she said, "trying to find out who it was." "And Marcus?" I was desperate," she said. "I thought maybe someone at the firm, a rival. I asked Marcus for help. I told him someone was trying to blackmail the company, not the real secret. He was so supportive. He said he would handle it." Arthur's mind, finally clear, saw the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. The only other person who had access to the Foundation's deep files, the only one who would know about the Janus account, the one who was close to Eleanor, the one who stood to gain everything from Arthur's destruction. "He's not supportive, Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice a low growl. "He's the blackmailer." "What?" "Number. Marcus? He loves you. He's like our son. He's the one who's been gaslighting me. He's the one who's been at your side. He's the one who sent me the photograph. He's been playing us both." The front door opened. "Playing who, Arthur?" Marcus Thorne stood in the entryway, a small, confident smile on his face. He was holding a leather briefcase. "Marcus," Eleanor said, her hand flying to her throat. "I thought you two might be having a difficult conversation," Marcus said, walking into the living room. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. But the king is dead. Long live the king." "It was you," Arthur said, his voice pure ice. "You've been blackmailing my wife." "Blackmail is such an ugly word," Marcus said, sitting in Arthur's chair. "I call it a legacy tax. You built an empire on my father's grave. I'm just here to collect." Arthur stared. Your father?" "Thomas Blackwood, or as I knew him, the sad burned man in the Swiss hospital. He had his lucid days. He told me everything. He told me about his perfect twin brother, the one who stole his life, his designs, and left him to die." Marcus smiled, a terrible, broken smile. "I'm not your son, Arthur. I'm your nephew. I've spent 20 years getting close to you, learning your business, earning your trust, all to be here, on this day, the day I take back what's mine." "The firm," Arthur whispered. "It was never about the money." "The money is an insult," Marcus spat. "It's about the name. You stole Blackwood. I'm taking it back. You're going to retire as planned, but you're not going to be founder emeritus. You're going to be disgraced. Tomorrow, the Times gets the full story. The fire, the bribes, the brother you left to die. The firm will be shattered, and I'll be there to pick up the pieces, to rebuild. They'll call me a hero." He had planned it all, the perfect psychological destruction. He had turned them against each other, made Arthur think he was crazy, made Eleanor think she was being protected. Arthur looked at Eleanor. Her face was a mask of horror. He then looked at Marcus, his nephew, a man twisted by a lifetime of inherited rage. Arthur Blackwood, the king, the man of control, finally saw the truth. His legacy was a lie. His monument was built on sand, and the tide had come in. He had two choices: fight and destroy them all, or abdicate. "You're right," Arthur said, his voice quiet. Marcus paused, his smile faltering. "What?" "You're right. The firm, it was built on Thomas's genius. It's his. It's yours." Eleanor looked at Arthur, her eyes wide. "Arthur, no." "It's done, Eleanor," Arthur said. He looked at Marcus. "You don't need to destroy the firm. I'll give it to you. I'll sign it over. Today, I'll retire. I'll vanish. No one will ever know. You'll get everything. But you have to leave him out of it. You have to leave my brother in peace." Marcus stared, his mind reeling. He had planned for a war, for denial, for a fight. He had not planned for surrender, for this total, instant capitulation. "Just like that?" Marcus said. "Just like that," Arthur said. "You win." Marcus looked from Arthur's broken, tired face to Eleanor's. He saw for the first time not a monster, but just an old man. He had won, but it felt hollow. "Fine," Marcus said, standing up. "My lawyers will be in touch." He walked out of the apartment. The silence was vast. Arthur and Eleanor just stood there in the ruins of the life they had built. "What have you done?" Eleanor whispered. I let go," Arthur said. He walked to her, and for the first time, he looked free. "It's not a monument, Eleanor. It's a prison, and I just gave him the key." He took her hand. "The money in the Janus account. Is there enough for 2 plane tickets?" The clinic in Switzerland was high in the Alps, a place of clean air and profound, sterile silence. Arthur walked down a long, white corridor. Eleanor waited for him in the lobby. He entered the room. A man, old and scarred, was sitting by the window, staring at the snow-capped mountains. Arthur sat down, his heart pounding. "Thomas?" The man didn't turn. "Thomas, it's Arthur." No response. Arthur sat there for a long time. He talked about their childhood. He talked about A&T construction. He talked about the fire. "I was afraid," Arthur said, his voice thick. "I saw the blueprints, and I saw you, and I chose the paper. I chose the lie. And I am so sorry, Thomas. I am so, so sorry. For the first time, the man turned his head. His eyes, one clear blue, one clouded by scar tissue, focused on Arthur. He didn't speak, but he slowly, painfully, lifted his hand. Arthur took it. And the two brothers, the two faces of Janus, the beginning and the end, sat in silence as the sun set over the mountains.